The stars were dying, not in the slow way that stars normally died, burning out over millions of years. These stars were being eaten, consumed by something that moved through space like a plague. Ambassador Thela stood before the great window of the council chamber and watched another system go dark. Her crystalline body, beautiful and fragile like living glass, trembled with fear. In her 300 years of life, she had never known war. Her people, the Valorians, had never needed to fight. They were scholars and artists, dreamers and builders. They had no weapons. They had no soldiers, and now they were going to die. The hollow swarm had arrived in their galaxy 6 months ago. No one knew where it came from. Some said it crawled out of the space between galaxies. Others believed it was older than the stars themselves. What everyone agreed on was simple. The swarm consumed everything. It did not negotiate. It did not stop. It simply ate 12 civilizations had already fallen. 12 species, gone forever. Their worlds were now empty husks, stripped of all life, all resources. All hope, the Valorian Confederacy, was next. "We have tried everything," said Counselor Morthax, his ancient voice heavy with despair. He was a Grellian, a species that resembled tall gray pillars with dozens of small arms. His kind had lived for 10,000 years in peace. Now they would die in silence. "Our shields cannot stop them. Our ships cannot outrun them. We have nothing left." The council chamber was full of representatives from a dozen peaceful species. Some were small and furry. Others were tall and thin. A few existed as clouds of light. All of them shared one thing. None of them had ever fought a war. The galaxy had been at peace for so long that the very concept of combat had become ancient history. Thela turned from the window. Her crystal eyes reflected the dying stars. "There is one thing we have not tried." The chamber fell silent. "The beacon," she said. Morthax made a sound of disbelief. "The beacon of last resort has not been activated in 4,000 years. And when it was, no one answered. It is a myth, Ambassador. A story we tell ourselves to feel less alone in the universe." Perhaps Thela agreed, but myths are all we have left. She walked to the center of the chamber, where an ancient pedestal stood covered in dust. No one had touched it in generations. The symbols carved into its surface were so old that their meaning had been forgotten, but everyone knew what it did. The beacon was designed to send a message across the entire galaxy, across every frequency, every dimension. It was a cry for help that would reach the farthest corners of space. It was built in a time when the galaxy still remembered what war was, and species still needed to be saved. Thela placed her crystalline hand on the pedestal. "If there is anyone out there who can fight, who can save us, they will hear this. And if no one answers?" Morthax asked quietly. "Then we die knowing we tried." She pressed down and the beacon activated. The signal exploded outward at speeds that should have been impossible. It passed through nebulae and asteroid fields. It bounced off dead moons and living worlds. It traveled through the cold void between stars, carrying a simple message in every language ever recorded. "We are dying. Please help us. Anyone who can fight, please come." The council watched their instruments in silence. Minutes passed. Then hours. The signal traveled farther than any communication had ever gone, reaching corners of the galaxy that had been unexplored for millennia. "Nothing. It was foolish to hope," Morthax said sadly. "We are alone." Thela closed her eyes. She thought of her home world, of the crystal cities that caught the sunlight and sang. She thought of her children, too young to understand why their mother looked so afraid. She thought of all the beauty in the universe that the swarm would devour. Then the console beeped. Every being in the chamber froze. Thela opened her eyes and stared at the screen. A response. Someone had actually responded. Where is it coming from? She whispered, "The technician," a small creature covered in blue fur, worked frantically at the controls. "The signal originates from the Outer Rim. Sector 774, the Sol System." The name meant nothing to most of the council. But Morthax went very, very still. "That is impossible," he said. "The signal is confirmed," the technician replied. It is definitely coming from Sol 3. Morthax turned to face the council, and for the first time in centuries, Thela saw genuine terror on his face. Sol 3 is a quarantine world. It has been forbidden to contact for 12,000 years. Why? Thela asked. Because Sol 3 is a death world. The word hung in the air like poison. Every species in the galaxy knew what a death world was. It was a planet so hostile, so dangerous, so utterly deadly that life should not exist there at all. Extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, predators everywhere, natural disasters that could destroy cities. On a death world, everything evolved to kill. And Sol 3, the planet the natives called Earth, was the worst of them all. The inhabitants of that world, Morthax continued, his voice shaking, are monsters. They evolved by fighting everything on their planet, including each other. They are violent beyond measure. They consume the flesh of other creatures. They poison their own air and water, and somehow survive. They are not like us. They are not peaceful. They are death-given form. The technician's console beeped again. They are sending another message. Let us hear it, Thela said. The speakers crackled with static, and then a voice spoke in a language that the translation system struggled to process. It was a rough voice, warm and strong, carrying an emotion that none of the council could identify. We heard you. We're coming. Hold the line. Silence fell over the chamber. Thela looked at Morthax. You said the beacon has been activated 3 times before? Yes. And no one ever answered. Correct. Then perhaps, Thela said slowly, we have been calling to the wrong part of the galaxy. Perhaps help was always there, waiting in the dark. Perhaps it took a true threat to finally wake them up. Morthax shook his head. You do not understand, Ambassador. We did not summon saviors. We summoned something far worse. The Deathworlders are coming. And when they arrive, we may wish the swarm had taken us first. But Thela was no longer afraid. She had seen her people's doom approaching. She had accepted their extinction, and now, for the first time in months, she felt something she had forgotten. Hope, even if it came wrapped in terror. Then let them come, she said softly. Let the monsters fight the monsters. And let us pray that when the battle is over, there is still a galaxy left to save. In the darkness of space, the swarm continued its advance. And from the far edge of the galaxy, 12 ships began their long journey toward the stars. 3 weeks passed like a held. Breath, the Valorian defense fleet gathered at the edge of their territory, watching their sensors and waiting for either death or deliverance. The hollow swarm was still coming, a darkness that grew larger every day. But somewhere between the swarm and the Valorians, something else was approaching. The humans were on their way, Admiral Keth commanded. The defense fleet from the bridge of the Shining Grace. He was a Valorian like Thela. Though his crystal form was harder, more opaque, shaped by decades of responsibility. He had never fought a battle in his life. None of his crew had. Their ships were designed for exploration and transport, not war. Now they would face the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known, alongside allies that terrified them almost as much as the enemy. Admiral, his sensor officer called out. Contact detected. 12 vessels approaching from Sector 4. Keth straightened. The humans. Confirmed. They will arrive within the hour. 12 ships. Keth almost laughed. The hollow swarm numbered in the millions. 12 ships would not even slow them down. Whatever the humans were planning would not be enough. But when the human vessels finally appeared on the visual display, Keth felt something he did not expect. Fear. The ships were ugly. There was no other word for them. While Valorian vessels were smooth and elegant, designed to flow through space like music, the human ships looked like they had been built by someone who hated the universe and wanted to hurt it. They were covered in thick armor plating, scarred and burned and patched in 100 places. Weapons bristled from every surface, more weapons than Keth had ever seen on a single ship. These were not explorers. These were not traders. These were machines of war, built by a species that understood violence in ways the Valorians could not imagine. Admiral, the sensor officer said, her voice trembling. "I am reading their ship specifications. The gravity on those vessels is 10 times stronger than our standard." 10 times? Keth could not believe it. His own bones would shatter under such weight. Their atmosphere contains a gas called oxygen. In high concentrations, it is explosive. Keth stared at the screen. The humans breathe explosives. Their body temperature averages 37 degrees, the officer continued. They are essentially walking furnaces. And Admiral, their primary vessels are named Defiance, Fury, and Unbroken. I do not know what those words mean, but the translation software suggests they are related to anger and refusal to submit. Keth understood then why the galaxy had quarantined Earth. These creatures were not just dangerous, they were impossible. Everything about them suggested a species that had evolved through constant war against their own planet. The lead human vessel transmitted a docking request. Keth approved it, though every instinct told him to run. 1 hour later, he stood in the docking bay with a small delegation, watching the airlock cycle open. The atmosphere that rushed out was thick and warm and smelled strange, like metal and something organic that Keith could not identify. Then the humans emerged. There were 4 of them. They walked upright on 2 legs, which was not unusual, but their movements were wrong. They were too smooth, too controlled, like predators pretending to be calm. Their eyes moved constantly, scanning the room, tracking every person, noting every exit. The leader was a female, according to the briefing documents. Her skin was brown, her hair black, and cut short. She wore a uniform covered in patches and symbols that Keth did not understand. When she saw the Valorian delegation, her face changed. She smiled. Keth felt his crystal heart freeze. The smile revealed teeth, white and flat, designed for tearing food apart. On every world in the galaxy, baring teeth was a threat display. It meant, "I am going to eat you." But the humans seemed to think she was being friendly. "Admiral Keth," she said. Her voice was deeper than expected, confident and warm. "I'm Captain Alina Vasquez of the UNSS Defiance. Thank you for having us." She extended her hand toward him, palm open, fingers spread. Keth flinched. Was she reaching for a weapon? Was this some kind of attack posture? "It's a handshake," Captain Vasquez explained, noticing his reaction. "A greeting. You take my hand, I take yours. We shake once. It means we're not holding weapons." Slowly, carefully, Keth extended his crystalline hand. The human's grip was firm and hot, almost burning against his cool surface. He could feel the strength in her fingers. The power that she was carefully holding back. This creature could crush me, he realized. She could break my hand without even trying, but she is choosing to be gentle. "Thank you for answering our call," Keth managed to say. "Thank you for calling," Vasquez replied. "We've been waiting a long time for someone to ask for help." Behind her, the other humans were already unloading equipment from their ship. Massive crates filled with technology that Keth did not recognize. Weapons, certainly, but also tools, medical supplies, and machines that hummed with barely contained energy. "Is this your full force?" Keth asked, trying to keep the disappointment from his voice. 12 ships? Vasquez's smile did not waver. 12 ships was all we could send on short notice. "But don't worry, Admiral. We didn't bring our military." Keth blinked. "You didn't?" "No, we brought volunteers. People who heard your message and chose to come. Soldiers who retired decades ago, engineers who wanted to make a difference, doctors who couldn't stand by while others suffered." She paused. "On Earth, we have a saying. It's not about how many you have. It's about how much each one is willing to give." A massive human male walked past carrying a crate that would have required for Valorians to lift. He nodded at Keth as if this was perfectly normal. Captain Keth said slowly, "The Hollow Swarm has destroyed 12 civilizations. They number in the millions. Your 12 ships cannot possibly stand against them." Vasquez looked at him for a long moment. Something changed in her eyes, something old and fierce and patient. "Admiral," she said softly, "my species spent 10,000 years fighting everything on our planet just to survive. We fought predators with teeth longer than your arm. We fought diseases that killed billions of us. We fought each other in wars that burned whole continents. And we're still here. She leaned closer. Do you know why? Keth shook his head. Because we don't know how to quit. We don't know how to surrender. We see something terrible coming, and instead of running, we plant our feet and say, not today. She straightened. The swarm has never met anything like us. And by the time this is over, they're going to wish they never had. Keth wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that these strange, terrifying creatures could do what no one else had done. But doubt still gnawed at him. How can you be so confident? Vasquez's smile returned, and this time Keth understood it. It was not a threat. It was a promise. Because we've been the underdog before, Admiral, and we always find a way to win. Now, the days before the battle were supposed to be filled with fear. Instead, they were filled with wonder. Ambassador Thela walked through the corridors of the Shining Grace and watched the impossible. Humans and Valorians worked side by side, preparing the ship for war. It should not have worked. The two species were so different that cooperation seemed like a fantasy, but somehow was working. In the engineering section, a human named Marcus Webb stood surrounded by Valorian technicians. He was explaining something, using his hands to draw pictures in the air. His voice was patient and kind, despite the frustration that must have come from working with beings so different from himself. The problem is your whole design, Marcus was saying. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong. But beautiful doesn't stop plasma bolts. What you need is layers. Armor on top of armor with gaps in between to absorb impacts. One of the Valorians raised a delicate hand. But such a design would be ugly. Marcus laughed. It was a strange sound, warm and rough. Friend, I've been on ships that looked like garbage cans welded together. They survived things that would make your artists cry. Pretty doesn't keep you alive. Strong does. He pulled out a small device and projected images onto the wall. They showed buildings, roads, cities, all of them built in strange, brutal styles. On Earth, we have these things called earthquakes. The ground shakes so hard that buildings fall down. Thousands of people die in seconds. He paused to let that sink in. So we learned to build differently. We made structures that could bend without breaking, that could take punishment and keep standing. Your ships need the same thing. Theala moved on, leaving the engineers to their work. She found herself in the medical bay, where a human doctor named Yuki Tanaka was teaching Valorian healers. Yuki was small for a human, with black hair and gentle eyes. But her words were anything but gentle. Human bodies are designed for damage, she explained. When we get cut, our blood hardens to seal the wound. When our bones break, they grow back stronger. When diseases enter our bodies, our immune system attacks and destroys them. A Valorian healer made a sound of disbelief. Your bodies fight invaders automatically? Every second of every day. We're walking battlefields. There's a war happening inside us right now, and we don't even notice. But surely such wounds are still fatal? Yuki smiled. I once treated a man who was shot 3 times in the chest. He walked into my hospital on his own legs, complained about the wait time, and asked if he could have coffee while I operated on him. The Valorian stared at her in stunned silence. He survived, by the way. Went back to work 2 months later. Thela continued her walk, her mind spinning. Everything she learned about humans made them seem less like people and more like forces of nature. How could any species survive such a hostile existence? She found her answer in the observation deck. Captain Vasquez stood alone by the window, staring out at the stars. She did not look like a warrior. She looked tired, sad even. When she noticed Thela approaching, she straightened and smiled. But the smile did not quite reach her eyes. Ambassador, can I help you? I have been watching your people, Thela said, learning about your world. And I find myself confused about what? About why you came. Vasquez turned back to the window. What do you mean? Your planet is dangerous. Your history is filled with violence. By all accounts, your species should care only about survival. And yet when you received our message, you came immediately. You crossed the galaxy to help strangers you had never met. Why, for a long moment, Vasquez did not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. Did they tell you about the wars? Yes, many wars. Terrible wars. Did they tell you what happened after? Thela hesitated. No. After every war, we rebuilt. After every disaster, we helped each other. When cities burned, we pulled survivors from the rubble with our bare hands. When plagues swept across continents, doctors worked until they collapsed trying to save lives. She turned to face Thela. Yes, we know how to destroy. But we also know how to heal. We know how to protect. We know what it means to suffer, which is exactly why we can't stand by while others suffer. Thela felt something shift inside her crystalline heart. You came because you understood our pain. You came because someone needed help. That's reason enough. But you owe us nothing. We don't do it because we owe. We do it because it's right. Vasquez's eyes were fierce now, burning with something that Thela had never seen before. On Earth, there's a concept called compassion. It means feeling what others feel, hurting when they hurt. And when you have compassion, you can't just watch people die. You have to act. Even if it's dangerous. Even if it costs you everything, Thela thought about her people. The Valorians had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to struggle. They had never needed compassion, because they had never known suffering. Perhaps. That was why they did not know how to fight. But the humans knew. They knew suffering intimately, personally, in their bones and their blood. And instead of making them cruel, it had made them kind. They had been forged in fire, and they had emerged not as monsters, but as protectors. Captain Thela said slowly, I think I finally understand. Understand what? Why the galaxy feared you for so long? It was not because you were violent. It was because you were strong in ways that we cannot imagine. And strength to those who have none always looks like danger. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, a real smile this time. You know what's funny? On Earth, we always wondered if we were alone in the universe. We looked up at the stars and asked if anyone else was out there. And now that we finally found you, we discover that everyone's afraid of us. Are you offended? No, I'm sad. Because we've spent so long wanting friends, and instead we found people who see us as monsters. Thela reached out and touched Vasquez's arm. The human skin was hot, almost burning, but Thela did not pull away. You are not monsters, she said firmly. You are what we should have been. Strong enough to protect, brave enough to fight, and kind enough to care. If we survive this, I will make sure the galaxy knows the truth about humanity. Vasquez looked at her with something like gratitude. And what truth is that? That the most dangerous species in the galaxy is also the most compassionate. And that is not a contradiction. It is a gift. Outside the window, the stars continued to shine. And somewhere in the darkness, the hollow swarm drew closer. But for the first time since the nightmare began, Thela was not afraid. She had seen what humans could do, and she believed. The hollow swarm arrived on the 7th day. Thela watched from the command center of the shining grace as the darkness spread across the stars. There were millions of them, perhaps billions, a writhing mass of bioships that moved like a single hungry creature. They blocked out entire constellations as they approached, swallowing the light of suns. The Valorian defense fleet numbered 300 ships. They were not warships, but they were all that remained. 300 vessels crewed by scientists and traders and artists, people who had never fired a weapon in their lives, and in front of them, forming a thin line between the fleet and the swarm, were 12 human ships. Admiral Keth's voice came through the speakers, trembling slightly. Captain Vasquez, the swarm is within weapons range. What are your orders? There was a moment of silence. Then Vasquez's voice replied, calm and steady. All human vessels, this is the defiance. You know why we're here? You know what we're facing? The odds are bad, and I won't lie to you. Some of us aren't coming home. Thela felt her crystal heart tighten. But that's never stopped us before, has it? We're the species that climbed out of caves and reached for the stars. We're the descendants of people who crossed oceans in wooden boats, who walked through deserts with no water, who survived ice ages and plagues and wars. Our ancestors looked at impossible challenges and said, we can do this. And they were right. On the tactical display, the 12 human ships began to move forward. Not backward, not sideways, forward. Toward the swarm. The galaxy thinks we're monsters. Maybe we are, but today, we're going to be the monsters that protect the innocent. Today we're going to show the universe what Deathworlders can do. The swarm seemed to notice the approaching ships. The mass shifted, tendrils of darkness reaching out toward the humans like fingers of death. Remember the Alamo? Vasquez continued. Remember Thermopylae. Remember every time our people stood against impossible odds and refused to break. We hold the line here. We hold the line now. Not one more civilization falls. Not one more species dies. Not today. The human ships accelerated. All vessels, weapons free. Give them hell. The battle began. Thela had never seen anything like it. The human ships dove directly into the heart of the swarm, weapons blazing from every angle. Plasma bolts and missiles and beams of pure energy tore through the darkness, ripping apart bioships by the hundreds, but the swarm was vast. For every ship destroyed, 1,000 more took its place. They swarmed around the human vessels like insects, clawing and biting and trying to tear them apart. The Defiance took a direct hit to its port side. Thela watched the armor buckle and burn, expecting the ship to die. Instead, it kept fighting. Damage control teams rushed to seal the breach while the weapons continued firing without pause. Hull breach on Deck 7, someone reported on the human channel. Venting atmosphere. Seal it off and keep shooting, Vasquez ordered. We can breathe later. Another human ship, the Fury, lost its main engines. It began to drift, helpless as swarm vessels closed in for the kill. But instead of surrendering, the Fury diverted all power to weapons and became a stationary gun platform, pouring fire into anything that came close. Fury is down, Keth said. They're dead in space. They're not dead yet, Vasquez replied. Look at their kill count. Thela looked. The Fury had destroyed over 2,000 swarm vessels and was still fighting. The battle raged for hours. The human ships took damage that would have destroyed any Valorian vessel 10 times over. Their hulls were torn open. Their systems failed. Their crews died at their stations, but they did not stop. The swarm had never encountered anything like this. Every species it had consumed had run or surrendered. Every civilization had broken under its weight. But these small, fragile, possible creatures from the death world refused to break. For the first time in its ancient existence, the swarm felt something new. Doubt. Then the Gallant made its final run. The ship was crippled, engines destroyed, weapons offline. Its captain, a man named James Chen, came on the communication channel. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. Defiance. This is Gallant. We're done. Reactor is going critical, James Vasquez said. Get your people to the pods. Already done. Everyone's evacuated. There was a pause. Alina, there's a swarm carrier directly ahead. The big one, coordinating the attack on Sector 4. I see it. I'm going to give it a kiss goodbye. James, no. Tell my kids I love them. Gallant out. The Gallant's engines flared one last time, pushing the dying ship forward. It accelerated toward the swarm carrier, a massive creature the size of a small moon. The swarm tried to stop it, throwing everything at the approaching vessel. But the Gallant's armor held just long enough. The ship struck the carrier dead center, and then the reactor exploded. The flash was visible from every ship in the fleet. A ball of pure light expanded outward, consuming the carrier and everything around it. When the light faded, there was nothing left but debris, and on the rescue frequency, the survivors of the Gallant were already talking. Did you see that? Direct hit. Chen, you magnificent lunatic. Someone get me a drink. I need to celebrate being alive. They were laughing. They had just lost their ship, nearly lost their lives, and they were laughing. Thela did not understand. She would never understand, but she was beginning to believe. The swarm recoiled. The loss of the carrier disrupted its coordination, and for the first time, its advance faltered. The human ships pressed the advantage, driving deeper into the enemy formation, refusing to give them a moment's rest. 9 days. The battle lasted 9 days. The humans fought without sleep, rotating crews in shifts, pushing their bodies beyond anything the Valorians thought possible. When one ship fell, the others closed ranks. When weapons failed, they found new ways to fight. When hope seemed lost, they found more hope. On the 9th day, the Hollow Swarm did something it had never done before. It retreated. The darkness pulled back, withdrawing toward the empty spaces between galaxies. It was not destroyed. Not truly. It would return someday, hungry as ever, but today, fled. And when the last swarm vessel vanished from sensors, the communication channels exploded with cheering. Valorians and Grellians and a dozen other species screaming in joy. Unable to believe what they had witnessed, 12 ships had held the line. Against millions, 12 ships crewed by Deathworlders had saved the galaxy. Thela stood in the command center, tears of liquid crystal running down her face. She did not know how to thank them. She did not know if thanks were enough, but she knew. One thing for certain, she would never forget what she had seen, and neither would the galaxy. Silence after battle was heavier than any storm. Thela walked through the corridors of the Defiance, stepping carefully around debris and damaged systems. The ship had survived, but barely. Great holes had been torn in its hull, sealed with emergency patches that glowed with warning lights. The air smelled of smoke and metal and something else, something organic that made her crystal senses uneasy. Human blood, she realized. The ship was stained with it. Of the 12 human ships that had answered the beacon, only 4 remained operational. The rest were either destroyed or so damaged that they would never fly again. The casualty lists were still being compiled, but the numbers were terrible. Hundreds of humans had died holding the line, and yet, as Thela moved through the ship, she heard something impossible: laughter. She followed the sound to a large room that the humans called the mess hall. It was crowded with survivors, some bandaged, some leaning on crutches, some simply sitting in exhausted silence. But there were also groups talking, joking, sharing stories of the battle. A woman with burns across her face was describing how she had manually fired a torpedo after the automatic systems failed. A man with his arm in a sling was arguing about whether ramming the carrier counted as 1 kill or 1,000. 2 young soldiers were crying in the corner, holding each other, but even they were smiling through their tears. "Gas at her, Thela!" She turned to find Captain Vasquez approaching. The captain looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, uniform torn and blood-stained, a bandage wrapped around her forehead. But she was walking. She was alive. Captain Thela said, "How are you?" "I've been better. I've also been worse." Vasquez gestured at the room. "What do you think?" "I do not understand," Thela admitted. "You have lost so many. Your ships are destroyed. How can your people celebrate?" Vasquez considered the question. "On Earth, we have a tradition. After a battle, after a disaster, after any terrible thing, we gather together and remember the good. We tell stories about the people we lost. We laugh about the absurd things that happened. We remind ourselves that we're still alive, still together, still human. But the pain is still there. It will always be there. But we don't let it consume us. We honor our dead by living fully, not by drowning in grief. Out. Besides, we won. Against all odds, we actually won. If that's not worth celebrating, what is?" A Valorian medic approached one of the injured humans, a young sergeant named Maria Santos. Her arm was broken, her face covered in burns, and she had not slept in days. The medic's instruments showed vital signs that should have indicated imminent death. "How are you still conscious?" the medic asked in bewilderment. Maria looked at him with tired eyes. "Because people still need help. I can sleep when we're done. But your injuries have had worse." She grinned. One time on Earth, I got hit by a car and walked 3 miles to the hospital because the ambulance was taking too long. This is nothing. The medic made a sound that might have been shock or disbelief. On any other world, this woman would be dead. Here, she was cracking jokes across the room. Thela watched as humans comforted Valorians, and Valorians tended to human wounds. The barriers between species seemed to have dissolved. They had fought together, bled together, almost died together. That created bonds that transcended biology. Captain Thela said, "What happens now?" Vasquez sighed. "We go home, eventually. Repair our ships, bury our dead, tell our families what happened. The usual routine. And if the swarm returns, then we come back. As many times as it takes. But why? You have lost so much already." Vasquez turned to face her fully. "Ambassador, let me tell you something about humans. We are stubborn beyond all reason. We do not know how to give up. When something threatens the people we care about, we will fight until there is nothing left of us. And even then, our ghosts will keep swinging. But you barely know us. We are strangers. You're not strangers anymore. You're friends, and humans protect their friends. Right." She paused. "Besides, you called for help. On Earth, that means something. It means you trusted us enough to ask, and we don't betray trust." 3 days later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Great Chamber was packed with representatives from every surviving species. They had all come to witness this moment, to hear the official record of what had happened at the edge of their space. Elder Counselor Morthax stood at the podium, his ancient body trembling. He looked out at the assembly with eyes that had seen too much. "For 12,000 years," he began, "we have lived in fear. Fear of the death world. Fear of the creatures who evolved there. Fear of what they might do if they ever left their quarantine." The chamber was silent. "We were wrong," murmurs rippled through the crowd. "The humans are not monsters. They are survivors. They have been forged by a world that tried to kill them every single day, and instead of becoming cruel, they became strong. Instead of becoming cold, they became compassionate. They understand suffering because they have suffered, and that understanding makes them kind." He paused, gathering himself. "They came to our aid when no one else would. They fought against impossible odds. They died for people they had never met. And when it was over, they did not demand payment or territory or submission. They asked only if we were safe." Thela stepped forward to join him at the podium. She had prepared a speech, but now the words seemed inadequate. "I asked their captain why they came," she said. "She told me it was because someone needed help. That was enough. That was always enough." She looked out at the assembly, at the dozens of species who had watched from safety, while 12 ships fought their battle. "The humans taught us something important. Strength is not about weapons or armor or numbers. Strength is about what you are willing to sacrifice for others. And by that measure, the humans are the strongest species in the galaxy." The chamber erupted in applause. Far away, on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, the news arrived. Humanity had saved the Confederacy. The Deathworlders had become heroes. There were no parades, no celebrations. Just quiet pride in a sense that maybe, after all these years of wondering if they were alone, humans had finally found their place in the universe, and from Earth, a new signal broadcast across the stars. It was not a warning or a threat. It was a promise. To anyone who hears this message, you are not alone. If you ever need help, if you ever face something too big to fight alone, call us. We will come. We will always come. Because that is what humans do. We protect our own. And now, you are our own. The signal echoed through the void, reaching corners of the galaxy that had never known hope before, and in the darkness between the stars. Something ancient and hungry heard it too. The swarm would return someday, but so would the humans. And next time would be more than 12 ships.